What do you want to watch? I think I want to watch this 30-minute video about the origins of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict from a Jewish historian. I feel like this guy will have some niche info that I don't know, or we don't know, but he'll also probably, the last video I saw was Gaza in Jewish history, and he just kind of like, he goes through the whole history of Gaza from the Canaanites. I don't think he mentions like a single bad thing Israel did in the entire history. So
Oh, yeah, it's 474 likes, not a single dislike. So I doubt it has a single inaccuracy because people like it.
No, he's not going to be inaccurate. It's like an omission thing. He's clearly got like a bias, but oh well, let's have a look. Because let's see. I don't think he's like a bad dude or anything. It's just, yeah, there's clearly a bias there. Maruti, I'm not going to watch the video of the Nutty Putty Cave incident. I don't really get bothered by gore videos, but that one, like, I was struggling to sleep after watching that one, so I don't know. Anyway, let's go. You ready?
Yes. Wait. Okay, now I'm ready.
Okay.
Hello, fellow students of Jewish history. My goal in this short video is to quickly cover the roots of the current unfortunate conflict, with emphasis on the period from the middle of the 19th century to the armistice of 1949. There's a lot of material on this crucial period that occupies much of the world's attention right now and really for the last century. Much of the material online is unfortunately highly tendentious and very misleading.
Can I say something quick? You know, as much as I do believe knowing the history is important, it does get kind of frustrating sometimes when I'm on Twitter and I'm trying to like call out like a war crime or like the bombing of that Greek Orthodox hospital or something like that. And somebody will say like, well, you know, it's a very complicated war. And the thing is, there's no amount of detail that you can give me that's going to make me be like, yeah, bombing that church, that church, there's no evidence that Hamas was operating in. You know, now if I just knew a little bit more about the Jews, then I would understand it. If I knew a little bit more about Jewish or Israeli history, I'd understand it. As much as, you know, we should know the history, like you don't need to know all of the history to call out the bombing of civilian infrastructure or call out the lack of proportionality from the Israeli response.
I've kind of noticed that. I think as long as but it depends on what your principles are, right? Because I think the history matters to a lot of people who go down this line of who was there first or who made the first move, and that's what we should use to apply to our politics today, right? I think that's whose original land is it, who's indigenous, and all this shit. But yeah, because I've always had the consistent position that there are three main things that people want that they deserve in that area, right? And it's Israeli civilians deserve to live in the security, right? Palestinians deserve this. Well, they both of them deserve to live in security, and Palestinians deserve self-determination that they don't have, and the refugees deserve refugee rights. Like as long as those three things remain constant, it's like you should be fine regardless of what the history is.
Lonerbox.
But I guess the problem is when
cuck bastard.
I think it does make a difference when people present Israel, especially, as just this kind of like country that's happened to just get surrounded on all sides and
you smarmy,
like threatened by everyone for not really any real reason apart from maybe anti-Semitism. And I think what I've noticed from my community is that people who are pro-Israel starting to look at their own state in a bit of a different light when they consider the amount of aggression that they've applied across the Middle East since the Balfour Declaration, right? In one way or another. So I don't know. I think it, like, at least personally, I think it's found that like because I think the Israeli kind of like right-wing cope is that everything we do is defensive, right? Everything we do is reactive to someone else doing aggression. But yeah, I think getting rid of that myth maybe like a good step forward.
It's important to know the history. Like, for example, I talk about all the time, like Ukrainian history has been so like unbelievably colonized by the Russians. It's always been told through the Russian perspective, the Ukraine. But and even if you know the history, it'll help you understand the conflict better. For me, it made me support Ukrainian sovereignty more. There's no amount of like reading of that would lead to me saying, you know what, it was actually when the UPA went to Poland and slaughtered all those people. Now that I know the history, it's actually okay to target civilians. Now that I know the true history of Ukraine, if Zelensky decided to cluster bomb strike Russian churches, now it's okay. Like, no, that's not going to happen. There's general principles we should uphold in every war that are consistent, including the protection of non-combatants and the responsibility to proportionality that all nation states should be upheld to. But Israel has been very, well, no, they're all kind of combatants because they voted for Hamas. Like, these are general principles we should uphold. regardless of the history.
The thing that really scares me is like the thought that IDF people have been watching those, like even generals maybe have been watching those videos of Gaza and the amount of and the people in the streets celebrating or even joining in torturing the hostages. I don't know if you saw the recent one where this hostage was getting taken in the back of a truck, and the people in Gaza were just gathering around and taking turns like whacking him with a plank.
I didn't see that. I saw a lot of
And-
videos of people getting smacked. I didn't see the plank video.
And I just wonder if there were like, or the women getting spat on, right? Like from the very beginning. And I wonder if there were IDF generals just watching that and that was like influencing their decision making or influencing their their levels of concern for collateral, you know, for civilian damage. Yeah, that's really scary because they're humans at the end of the day. They probably are going to be fucking, yeah. But then that's going to result in war crimes, you know?
I was talking to you about this earlier today. The commander of Rusich is a real bastard. But one of the things that's really horrific that he did is he released a guide on how to torture Ukrainian POWs and get away with it. And it included instructions about how to use a phone book when you execute people, so you don't leave burn marks on their body from the parts of the muzzle that they would push on the body before firing. Talked about where to beat them so you don't see the bruises on TV when they do one of those mock trials, and all these instructions, you know, 21 roses, all that horrible stuff. You can Google that if you want. It's too graphic. And when he was brought up to talk about it by some Russian journalists, and they're like, "Is it really smart to say that type of stuff publicly?" And I also love that frame.
Remember
publicly.
the Holodomor?
The framing was so bad from the journalist, but his response was even worse. His response was, if we engage in this type of torture and we engage in this type of activity, then it'll be harder for Russians to surrender because we know the Ukrainians will just do it right back to us. The type of logic that people use to justify war crimes is really gross, but there is a logic to it. And for some people, it could be, we know they're going to do it to us if they had the opportunity, so we're just going to do it to them. They'll show us no mercy, we'll show them no mercy. Is a logic that I've heard sometimes from soldiers.
Yeah, I feel like in Israeli-Palestinian stuff, especially in the 90s, I was reading this whole thing about why the Second Intifada erupted so quickly and in the way that it did, was because at least through the mid-90s, both the militant wings of Fatah and of Hamas and of Israel, like with the IDF, had all basically decided that the other side was going to need to be persuaded or pushed through violent means. So you had the youth wing of Fatah like arming up in the West Bank pretty aggressively, and then the IDF basically adopting this policy that if there's any scuffles or there's any fuck about, we're going to clamp down on it as aggressively as possible, as a way of like sending the message that like you can't fuck with us basically. But the problem is that when both groups are doing it, you just have this like massive eruption of violence. And even though the IDF were also proposed in the mid-90s to take a more de-escalatory approach, there was a separate model that was proposed to contain violence in very specific areas and to not let people get caught in the crossfire and things like that. But they didn't adopt that one. They never used it. Yeah. And then you had like the Second Intifada with just like thousands of people dying across both sides. Yeah. Eek. All right. Let's learn about history.
Relying very heavily on the research is Professor Gudrun Kramer from the Free University of Berlin, who wrote a very serviceable one-volume history. She has made a very good case for the fact that most historians come to this topic with a great degree of tunnel vision and tend to see the entire history from within the perspective of their own national, religious, ethnic backgrounds.
Okay.
And I'm going to do my best to try and rise above that. Obviously, I have my own biases and my own opinions like everybody else, but let's try and go over the facts in as dispassionate a manner as possible, and then I can leave it up to you to debate what it means for our current moment.
Lonerbox, read the super chat. Ugh, fuck you. All right, hang on. Sorry. I mean, thanks for the Killer99 with the £5. What do you think of the leftist Bin Laden fans on TikTok? I gave my opinion yesterday. What do you think, Dylan?
Oh, outside of that, I mean, I think what it is that, number one, I don't think that the Guardian taking down the letter is smart. I think it would be smarter is for them to provide proper context for the letter. Talk about like, you know, Bin Laden's background, why, like certain things that he like explaining like the background of certain stuff he said in there, because there's a lot of stuff in there that like somebody reading it for the first time won't even understand. due to the geopolitics of the region. I think what probably happened is a bunch of people, definitely young Americans, didn't know much about the geopolitical history of what motivated the 9/11 hijackers or motivated groups like Al Qaeda, because it's pretty easy to look at a group that goes and slaughters civilians. You just be like, that's bad. You don't really need to go any point past that. Same thing with Hamas and the October 7th attacks. And so when they heard those arguments, and they've never heard like a counter argument before, they were just like, wow, this is super amazing. Even though like much of the article is like, the gays are bad, freedom sucks, casinos are evil. It's like half the article is just nonsense like that. And there's also the stuff in the article that's like horrific geopolitics, talking about like groups that America should have like not supported that were being genocided. But I think it's just that they never heard that point before. And so since they've never engaged with it before, and they've never heard anybody actually sit down and respond and explain, while much of what bin Laden said was like drunk, you'd believe it was drunken ramblings that the man drank, but he doesn't. So I think they'd never heard the counter argument, so they didn't know what to do. And so they just kind of like, wow, this is amazing, this is revolutionary. When his letter is not really that convincing whatsoever.
I think they could have done with, if they kept it up, they should have annotated it. Like just, oh, by the way, I know he's saying that America supported the Russian actions in Chechnya, but they actually didn't. Just because a Middle Eastern person says America bad doesn't mean everything they're going to say is correct, right? Just shit like that.
And the Chechnya stuff makes no sense. The thing is, bin Laden is like the pampered rich kid, a college educated jihadi, right? Like 99.9% of jihadis are not like him. I support the working class jihadis personally.
Whoa. On youtube.com. Okay.
Not really.
Yeah.
I look, all I'm saying is we should read working class jihadi theory more, because I believe in the proletariat.
I think it's not representative. Getting other people to do his dirty work for him and shit. Anyway. Trans Rights Crab with a 5 Canadian. Thank you very much. Can you ask Dylan if it's okay for me to endearingly call him Banderite Burns?
Lonerbox.
If not, what about the Maryland Menace?
Fuck bastard.
Maryland Banderite Burns is fine. I already get called like an Azovite and all these other things all the time. But yeah, sure, I don't care. I'm already called a pervert, so how worse can it get than that?
Do we think bin Laden was a champagne terrorist?
I like that. Champagne terrorist.
All right. Afraz Kazmi with the 400. I think those are rupees as well. They are. Dylan, what's your opinion on Burma and the refugees coming to India causing ethnic strife in Manipur?
I think that they should still accept the refugees. I mean, they were ethnically cleansed. They were slaughtered by the Myanmar military. If they're sent back, there's a good reason to believe that they'll all be slaughtered and killed. So I think that to some extent they have to suck it up and provide the responsibility that nation states have when refugees flee to their country. If you look at how the Myanmar military engages in warfare, it is, we heard that there's some rebels over here, so we're going to come here, rape, murder, and kill everyone, burn down the village, and hopefully there'll be no more resistance in this area. And if a villager does not flee in time, they will gang rape them, they will kill them, and they will slaughter them. This has been well documented. They'll burn the corpses afterward as a message to other people in the region. And so if that's the type of stuff that they would be sending them back to if they were to expel them, then they have to accept them, and they have to find a way to live with them until the civil war in Myanmar is over and a democratic government and a multi-ethnic coalition has been installed.
Walden TV, thanks for the $4.99. Well, that's okay. We're get through this video. Shit.
So let's start with a discussion of terminology, because as Professor Kramer rightly points out, there is power in naming things. And so my intention here is just to achieve clarity, even though some anachronisms may result. And I apologize for those of you who are deeply steeped in this history. This will be somewhat basic. But let's just make sure we're all on the same page with this. First of all, the term Palestinian. So Palestine is the name that was given to this region of the world. In the next section, I'm going to take you through some maps to say, well, which region exactly. It is a term that derives originally from a Roman adaptation in the 2nd century. After having dealt with 3 revolts of the Jewish population, they decided to completely wipe out the name Judea, which was the Jewish name of the southern part of what would be the land of Israel today.
Okay, I know it's picky, but there were people who were calling it Palestine before the 2nd century. I don't know if it was that if the name Judea was like completely wiped out, as if like there were other people calling it different things. But yeah, Herodotus was calling it Palestine like 500 years before the Jewish revolts. So, but again, that's still a contention, though. It's a contention about how solidified that decision was after Bar Kokhba. But again, not that it matters. It's just funny that people fight over it. Yeah. Anyway.
I know, like, there was the one like revolt during the Roman times. I don't know anything about the other ones. Did they, like, their football team win or something? Like, do you know about the other revolts?
What team?
Their football team. Like, do you know what caused the other revolts? Do you know?
The Jewish revolts.
Yeah.
I thought it was persecution. No,
probably.
If it was Romans. I don't even know exactly what Bar Kokhba was about. Why they did it. Like, just Roman rule was not well received. Military presence, unpopular changes, colonizing.
Those are all revolty things.
Erecting places of worship on the Temple Mount. Oh,
for Jupiter.
Damn, that's cringe. Yeah, just decolonial struggle. Okay, all right.
They renamed the entire section Palestina. So that term entered into Western usage already from the 2nd century and was later adapted, for example, in the Arab world as Filastin. Now, Palestinian was also used in the 20th century and in the 19th century as well to refer to Jews who lived in this region as well, who would call themselves Palestinian Jews. I know that sounds strange today, but for example, look at this newspaper, the Palestine Post, which is actually a Jewish newspaper. Its name was later changed to the Jerusalem Post, but that's just because the term did not.
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know that the Jerusalem Post used to be called the Palestine Post. That's crazy.
That's cute. I didn't know that.
This is why I like this guy. I don't really like his biases, and I think he's open about them. But yeah, I always learn something new from historians. Yeah.
The strong ethnic and national connotations that it has today. So that's Palestinian. Israeli. Israeli refers to people who have citizenship in the state of Israel. And approximately 20% of the people who have citizenship in the state of Israel would call themselves Palestinian. This is just an indication of how confusing it is. Israeli citizenship is extended to a large number of Arabs, Druze, Christians, Baha'i, and other peoples who are not Jewish. So Israeli refers to a citizenship in the state of Israel. What about the term Arab? So Arab is an ethnic term that refers to a large number of people all across the entire Middle East. It includes Palestinians, but it does not include Muslims. Muslim is an even larger term. It is a religious term referring to people who worship according to the dictates of Islam, and that includes all kinds of people in the Far East, for example, or in Africa, and of course in the United States and on. The term Jew is also, it's a religious term, but it's also an ethnic term because many people who are Jews do not consider themselves religious, but nevertheless they still fall within this ethnic definition. And as I mentioned, about 80% of Israelis are also Jewish. But about half of the world's Jews are not.
Why aren't more Palestinians Israeli citizens? I guess we'll probably find out in this video. That's a pretty new to the party question.
Israelis. Israel houses about half of the entire population of the world's Jews, in other words. Finally, Zionist. So Zionist, the term Zionism was coined in the late 19th century to describe this movement towards reestablishing a Jewish homeland in the land which we're going to call Palestine. This is an aspiration that does not necessarily mean it has to come to fruition in actual Israeli statehood. It can also be understood as support for the land of Israel. And once again, the majority of Jews clearly are Zionist and support the state of Israel to one degree or another, but there are many Jews who are not Zionists. There are even some Israelis who are not Zionist, believe it or not. Ooh. That's because Israel is a democratic country that tolerates a very wide range of difference of opinion on a whole host of political, social, economic, and other issues. So that's our basic survey of terminology. Let's look at the maps a little bit. Where exactly is Palestine? The borders of the region which has been called Palestine varies significantly over the space of the last 2 millennia. There has never been a state of Palestine, that is true, but the region has had that term already, as we see, from the 2nd century. It is especially well used after the 7th century when it becomes an Islamic land, and in the region of the Ottoman Empire, which ruled for almost
with you for a
exactly
moment
500.
about the whole there's never been a state of Palestine. Why does that matter? I never understood why that mattered. Like, until very recently, there wasn't ever a state of Taiwan. But if the people of Taiwan identify as Taiwanese, want a democratic system, want their own ways, then why should we deny them that, even if before, like, they were expelled from the mainland?
I
by the
really don't
communists?
understand it. It doesn't make any sense because, like, the argument, the counter argument, there's never been a state is like it's not about. We're not saying a state got invaded. We're saying people who lived there who were owed self-determination got kicked out, like, which is the opposite of self-determination.
Until
But,
recently,
yeah.
there was never a Ukrainian state, which there was a Ukrainian state. There was briefly before the Soviet takeover, the Ukrainian People's Republic. There, of course, was like the anarchist, like, Ukrainian Free State in the south, led by Nestor Makhno. There were all these different variations of Ukrainian state. Of course, the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, and then, of course, modern Ukraine. But if none of that ever happened, and the entire time the Russian Tsardom just continued to dominate Ukraine, and then the Russian Tsardom collapsed today, does that mean because there was never a Ukrainian state, that makes the creation of Ukrainian state stupid or not necessary if the people want it? It makes no sense to me. But I come from a self-determination perspective, not like a super, like, nationalistic, like, Russian perspective, or like nationalistic Israeli perspective.
Well, that's it's kind of like if Ukraine, after the Declaration of Independence, like right after it just got invaded by Russia, and like, well, it's not a state yet. Sorry. Yeah. So, probably one of the weaker arguments, but yeah.
Years until the beginning of the 20th century, it was actually divided between 2 administrative sections, that of Jerusalem and that of Beirut. So the regional identity of
You've
Palestine.
seen that, the no flag, no country.
But they got a flag. I know, because the Israelis are very
They ban it.
they
Yeah.
ban it, and they crack down. They beat up people with watermelons. I've seen it.
Have you seen the
Remember
no
the
flag?
Holodomor?
Albert, thanks for the sub. Have you seen this?
I have not.
There's the Lego version's probably better.
And we built up empires. We stole countries. That's what you do. That's how you build an empire. We stole countries with the cunning use of flags. Yeah. You just sail around the world and stick a flag in. I claim India for Britain. And they go, you can't claim us. We live here. 500 million of us. Do you have a flag? We don't need a bloody flag. It's our country, you bastard. No flag, no country. You can't have one. That's the rules that I've just made up. And I'm backing it up with this gun that was lent from the National Rifle Association. That was it, you know.
I gotta say, after spending some time here in the United Kingdom, dealing with their airport system and dealing with the people, I understand why the British went around the world to conquer everything, because they didn't want to fucking be here.
Yep.
It's rainy all the time. Everybody drinks to get away from the depression, and all of your airports suck.
What did you learn about Scottish weather today, Dylan?
It's rainy, it's dreary, and it makes you want to kill yourself.
I was going to ask you anything nice about.
Oh, like the Highland cows were nice. Haggis wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I like the amount of churches, even though they've all seemingly been turned into nightclubs, strip clubs, and bars. I enjoyed the Har. The Har was cool. I liked the sea fog. I felt like I was in a horror movie in the beginning opening scenes of it, which was cool.
The Har was really thick today. It was going over all the fields, like over all the bales of hay and into the forests and shit. Yeah.
Got to see that cool statue of William Wallace, the Jew Skinner. And I'm calling him that because he did that. And people don't know about it. And
I don't think he did it. I think just the people did after they took over the one of the
well, I would
towns.
say a Jew's being skinned under your watch is still pretty bad.
You know what? Yeah, I agree. It was Cressingham, wasn't it? To make a belt for Wallace's sword.
What? He had a belt out of Jew skin.
I think that's probably
what?
folklore. Hang on.
That's crazy.
Was he the Jew though? No, he was the here's the treasurer who became known as the treasurer. Was he the Jew? Because I know that the crown would task Jews with doing lending in different Scottish towns and cities, and then they became very resented by the locals. There was one town that got taken over by Wallace when the people living there skinned the local Jew alive. Was it this guy?
I'm a little surprised though that Mel Gibson didn't include the Jew skinning, considering
Mel Gibson makes a great Scot, doesn't he?
He doesn't make a good Scot.
Alcoholic and racist.
An alcoholic anti-Semite. He's the perfect Scot.
I don't think this is Cressingham though. Was he? I don't think he was a Jew.
I will say the people here are nice when they're not intoxicated.
The English began to cross the bridge. It was so narrow that no more. This is Stirling Bridge, isn't it? It was so narrow that 2 horsemen could ride abreast. The vanguard had crossed. Wallace and Murray released their infantry in a downward charge, which crashed into the English. Unable to deploy, the vanguard was slaughtered, while their colleagues watched impotently from the far side of the river. At least 100 knights perished, among them Cressingham. Warren fled. It was later said that the Scots skinned Cressingham's body to make a belt for Wallace's sword. Oh.
That's slightly problematic, I would say.
It's good.
Kind of problematic.
Scottish recycling. You know, we make do with what we have up in these this scarce environment. Okay.
Palestine, or in Arabic Filastin, was not very well developed really until the 20th century. It nevertheless did have consciousness. You see from this newspaper, Filastin, which was actually established in 1909, very early on in this period. But for many, the term Palestine geographically is identical to the boundaries of the State of Israel, which in itself is a huge problem. As you see in this depiction here, Filastin, which has the slogan Min il Nahar il Bahar, from the river to the sea, the river being the Jordan
Can't
River
say that on Twitter anymore.
on the west and the Mediterranean Sea on the east. By saying Min il Nahar il Bahar, you're saying essentially, at least this is how Jews hear it, that there's no space for Israel. There's only space for Palestine. In other words, Palestine will be
that's
free,
a fair
free of
classification.
I can find you the poll. The way that you can figure it out is where's this fucking poll? All right. Okay. The way that you figure it out is like, when you see polls that ask you about 1 or 2 states, usually one state is split up into one state solution for 2 peoples and a Palestinian state from the river to the sea, as if they're they're different things. Usually, this one gets like between 20 and 30%. This one gets like between 60 and 70%. This is just after the war started. This is like a month into the war. So 5% of Palestinians agreed with the idea of one state solution for 2 peoples. 74% said Palestinians safe from the river to the sea. So it does kind of sound that when they say this, they don't mean for 2 peoples.
Can I be honest?
Right?
I've seen people using the recent polling from Palestine to kind of justify the bombing of Palestine. Like, hey, they hate us, they hate Israel. Look at the polling, they hate Israel. And the person that's being polled is having their house next to them actively like demolished, and half their family killed in Israeli airstrike. I mean, what do you think they're going to answer in a poll? If you asked Ukrainians right now in a poll, like, hey, do you think Russia should no longer exist? Like 90% of them are going to be like, of course. And we would no longer be bombed. I think it would makes more sense to me, at least, to look at the polling before the fighting. I think it would make more sense.
Before the fighting, I think one state solution for 2 peoples was polling, it was polling around 27, 28%. River to the sea was usually still polling around 60 or 50%. So
it'd be like a 17-point jump.
Yeah. Like this has usually been, sometimes one state for 2 peoples will overtake 2 states, but I think that's rare. That's only been in the last few years. Generally, the hierarchy of preference is river to the sea first, then 2 states, then one state for 2 peoples. But the thing is like when Western leftists call for river to the sea, they think they're saying this, right?
Yeah, I remember, what's his name? Ben Collins, I think Destiny had a debate with. I was watching him ask for like one democratic state where everybody lives together in harmony and like hits drums in a drum circle or whatever. It just doesn't seem, there's just so much spite. It just doesn't seem practical. I just don't, it's hard to believe it's possible.
I don't think it's impossible for like ever, but it's just, right now, it seems to be the only solution that would actually at least be tolerable for both sides would be two states, because Israel has never conceded to this. They would rather nuke the entire planet, right? And neither of them want this. So it's like you kind of have to meet there. But obviously that might change, because if diplomacy even starts, there's going to be a whole process, and then people's preferences for any of these three things will obviously change throughout that. So, or it might not, but yeah, who knows? That's kind of how I see it. That's why I hate people in the fucking West arguing over one or two states. It's the most boring conversation you can have on the subject. And you know why people do it? I don't know if I told you this before. People have that conversation. They prefer that conversation because people in this side of the world have a colonizer mindset. They want to argue over borders and partition and fucking, because even one state's kind of partition like, right? Because you're going to gerrymander the fuck out of the whole region to make sure that there's equal representation for both groups. It's like, that's not really our place to decide that, like the final state.
But it would
right?
end up
It's
looking
just,
like Lebanese politics, where they have like certain certified Jewish seats, certain certified like Palestinian Muslim seats. Like I have no clue how the system would be set up.
yeah, one state for two peoples would be, you'd have to do so much like institutional arrangement for that and so many restrictions. But yeah, that's why I don't like the big massive debate over one or two states. I think that's just especially British people or Americans with the partition genes kicking in. I wake up, I have my tea and biscuits, then I fancy a good old jolly partitioning of a country.
Draw some borders. I remember when the war between Russia and Ukraine first started, I love watching all the different like partition plans that people were proposing. I saw people giving Ukrainian land to Hungary. I saw Ukrainian land going to Poland. People were having fun with MS Paint.
I can't possibly have my afternoon nap before I've partitioned at least 2 or 3 of the colonies.
Jews, Judenrein, which is why many Jews find this deeply offensive. So in other words, the boundaries of Palestine, as understood by many Palestinian supporters today, are virtually identical to the boundaries of modern Israel, shown here. In the next video in this planned series, I'll explain what are the differences between Israel proper, Gaza, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. But for now, this is basically the territory that we're going to be speaking about over the course of this video. At the risk of horrible oversimplification, Jewish claims at their root are based in the idea that this is the ancient homeland of the Jews. And Palestinian claims are based on the notion that they conquered the land in the 7th century with the advent of Islam, and that makes them essentially indigenous because they have been living in that region for some 1,300 years. This is a little bit like something I saw with 2 of my grandchildren the other day. I don't mean to reduce these complex and painful issues to something very juvenile, but this will at least help as a metaphor. 2 of my grandchildren have a favorite chair, which was given to them by the other set of grandparents, and it actually has the name of the older child written on it. So the younger child was sitting on it, and the older child wanted to take it from the younger child, and we said, no, you have to let her sit there. But then she saw something that distracted her. She got up from the chair and she went off to do something else. And in that time, the older child went and sat in the chair, which upset the younger child, seeing that she was in there. And that involved a whole bunch of fighting. But basically,
then the younger
that's the
child
same
ethnically
kind of
cleansed the older child.
It's so much. It should be so much more simple, right? If you've lived there for a few generations, I think that's, yeah. If the ones who live there, you should never get fucking evicted from your house, like from a place that you live in, or if you were born in, right? Like generally speaking, there might be exceptions if you're talking about like illegal settlement and stuff like that. But generally speaking, if you're there, you've been there for a while, like other people can come in and can come back if they're like indigenous, if they feel like they were kicked out a while ago. But just build new houses or something. Yeah, fuck. I don't know. It should be quite simple. The way I like to phrase it is that from 1917 until 48,
you smarmy cuck bastard.
The Palestinians just had the better case. They just had a much stronger argument for their case because they were the majority and they lived there, right? The Jews didn't have a very good case at all, but they had excellent advocates. The Palestinians had the worst advocates in the world. they had advocates so shit that even other Arab states didn't really like them.
Like that, what was
Like
that? The
Al-Husseini,
Grand
right?
Mufti who was
Yeah.
like kind of buddy with Hitler.
Yeah, and even Jordan. Like the reason Jordan did their secret deal with Israel to for Jordan to take the West Bank during the 48 War, and for them to try and not clash. They did clash, but the deal was to not clash. Deal was partly there because Jordan did not want to have Al-Husseini for a neighbor in the West Bank. Yeah. So, yeah, a part of the reason, yeah. And obviously Israel didn't like him either, so.
I was here first versus you left and then I took it. The fact that the name is written on the chair does not necessarily feed into whose chair it is forever and ever, because, to extend this back to our situation, the main source of the claim, the deed, as it were, for the land of Israel for Jews is the Bible, and Muslims do not regard the Bible, the Hebrew scriptures, and for that matter the Christian scriptures, as being duly sanctified the same way that Jews and Christians do. So the deed is not relevant here. It's true that there's multiple points to demonstrate that Jews were in the land of Israel from ancient times. The oldest non-biblical example is the famous Merneptah stele shown here, which dates from about the year 1209 BCE and refers to a people called Israel living here. But the counter
argument, the Rosetta Stone, because the Rosetta Stone is all busted up.
Argument that when the Muslims conquered in the 7th century, as you see in this map, is also a very strong one. And in the absence of divine intervention, which I'm sure both sides would like to appeal to, there's no easy way to reconcile these claims. So let's move to the Ottoman period and specifically.
I feel like he could have done a job at presenting the secular arguments as well, right? Because the Jewish argument, they do have a secular argument, which is that they were indigenous, that they were there, then they were kicked out, and then the Muslim conquest came after.
We did say they were indigenous, right?
Yeah, and then the Arab one is that, well, we lived here, so it's like human rights. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's maybe a better way to phrase the argument, but yeah, the religious one, I don't know. I wonder if that's why that's why sometimes like the pro-Zionist people sometimes look a lot more unhinged to Westerners, because the very far right, like fanatic pro-Israel people will always just pick up a history book, and it's usually the history book they're talking about is like the Bible, right? And Palestinians are saying, oh, we lived here in the 40s and they kicked us out. It's like it's so much easier to sell that latter one than as the former, yeah.
Specifically to the area we'd like to concentrate, the 19th century, to understand how this conflict expressed itself. The metaphor of my grandchildren in the chair is not entirely accurate for a lot of reasons, one of which is that there was always a small presence of Jews in the land of Israel, as best we can tell from historical records. Having a look at the very weak statistics from the Ottoman Empire, it wasn't until the latter part of the 19th century that they started to provide more, reliable statistics, but this gives us at least some sense of it. In 1850, looking at Ottoman subjects only, not foreign people living in this land, Muslims and Druze who were included in this survey amounted to about 88% of the population, Christians about 8%, and Jews about 4%. But by the time you move to the later part of the 19th century, there is a significant shift in Jewish attitudes, and many Jews, really absorbing the national movements that are rocking much of Europe at the time, Eastern Europe in particular, they begin to explore the idea of developing a Jewish nationalism with the object of creating a Jewish national state in this part of the world as well. The most famous early movement is called Bilu, taken from this verse in the Bible, Beit Yaakov L'chu v'nelcha, house of Jacob, let us arise and go, meaning go to the land of Israel and colonize it there in order to establish a Jewish settlement back in the ancient homeland. And in fact they did, working the land with some success, but they were heavily supported by Jews around the world. The idea of Zionism, especially promoted by Theodor Herzl, really caught the imagination of Jews living around the world, saying, yes, of course, this is a fantastic idea. And although most Jews were not specifically willing to pick themselves up and move to Israel, they were overwhelmingly very happy to support the movement, especially financially. You can see in this poster here, these are some English language posters, help him build Palestine. Once again, it's clearly a Jewish poster. At the bottom, it's written in Yiddish, helft ihm bauen Eretz Yisrael, help him build the land of Israel. This was the kind of fundraising poster that was used by the Jewish National Fund, established specifically to buy lands in Palestine, which they bought legally throughout this entire period. Here's another one that gives you a sense of the.
It looks very Soviet, like labor movement, because I guess it was like a lot of socialists at the beginning of the Zionist movement. Yeah.
Ben Gurion, I believe.
Yeah.
He wanted to be like the Jewish Lenin, didn't he? Pretty sure that's exactly what he said. He wanted to be like a Jewish Lenin.
Did he say that?
I don't know if he said that, but I believe I've heard that somewhere. Somebody in chat can tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, the Soviets were the first they were the first state to give de jure recognition to Israel. So, in America, very shortly after.
Do you think he's going to talk about what they did after they bought the land, like kicking off the old tenants and stuff like that? Do you think there's going to be any mention?
I don't know. Maybe. It's you can always tell the bias when people talk about the initial purchases, because if you're pro-Zionist, you'll just say they bought land and drained the swamps and made huge Jewish magic on the farmland to make it like a prosperous economy, right? Or the picture of them buying a sand dune and building Tel Aviv on it, right? Next to Jaffa. And then the other side is like you would talk about how some of it was purchases where they evicted tenant farmers, yeah. And I think because you got three things to choose from there, and two of them, like you can just take one out and make it sound totally based. Yeah, kind of cheeky. Ooh, you know, what I learned very recently was like why. I was telling you this off stream, but like the reason that Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews are actually very right wing in Israel, and one reason for that is that the first reason is that when they came from the Jewish exodus in the 40s and 50s. They felt like they weren't treated very well by the socialists who ran the state throughout that period. They felt like they weren't given appropriate housing. They felt like they were locked out of the education system or locked out of professional systems, professional jobs. They felt like they were discriminated against. Well, they were discriminated against. So they felt like they didn't really have much of an allegiance with the socialists who led the government. And that's one reason. The other reason is that they also had an actually extra special dislike of Arabs because of how them and their parents and grandparents were treated in Arab and Muslim countries. Like, so that's kind of the explanation for why there's like Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews are actually like quite right wing, especially Sedera was the town that's like 85% Moroccan and like quite close to Gaza, and they're very, very right wing over there. Yeah. Because they see the Middle East as how other Arabs see us. Yeah, well, I just thought that was quite interesting. Hey, Beast Process, how's it going? All right, let's go. But yeah, I never knew that. I never knew those two reasons for why. And I think, was it partly because of the Mizrahi and Sephardic vote that Begin got in the 70s? I don't know if that's exactly why, but I know that that's like those are the two big reasons that they vote right. Yeah.
Of a nation reborn on its ancestral soil. It really appeals to the imagination. It's young, it's powerful, has kind of like a socialist vibe to it. And in fact, the early settlements did have very strong socialist leanings and so on. So basically, as you move through
it's the majority of Bibi's support. Damn. I feel like most people would think the opposite, right? I'd imagine if you ask the average person, they would probably think the Ashkenazis are like the. But I guess is it the case?
Isn't Ben Gurion one of them? Isn't he also a descendant from one of those expelled communities?
I thought he was Ashkenazi.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Wait, is he? I thought obviously every prime minister was Ashkenazi. Are there any non-Ashkenazi Israeli prime ministers?
Well, wait, not Ben Gurion. I'm sorry. What's his name?
Smotrich.
I'm thinking of the modern, like, very fashy dude in Netanyahu's cabinet. What's his name?
Ben Gvir?
Ben Gvir, yeah.
Because I wonder, I've heard this as well, but I don't know if it's true. Is it true that people who are Mizrahi and Sephardic see the Ashkenazis as kind of like the privileged, like liberal class? Is that a thing?
I have no clue.
I don't know. Yes. I'm Mizrahi, and yes, that's kind of fun, isn't it? That the non-white Jews see the white Jews as the European Jews as fucking like the same way, I guess, like American people see John Kerry or some shit, you know? I just never thought about that before. Wow.
Early 20th century, the population
crazy,
of
chat.
Jews in the region
Absolutely
increases
insane.
dramatically.
The
Looking at
coastal elite. Yeah.
this chart of statistics, which was taken by the British, much
Ben Gavir's European. Okay, yeah.
more accurate and
No, he means Ben Gavir. Oh, fuck, I don't know. Fuck, I don't care. Wait. Is Ben Gavir Ashkenazi? His father was born in Jerusalem to Iraqi Jewish immigrants. His mother was a Kurdish Jewish immigrant, so I guess that means he's Mizrahi, right?
I would assume so.
Okay.
reasonable in the Ottoman figures. You can see that in 1922, the blue column are Jews. Of course, the green column are the Muslims. There's also Christians. And then here we've broken out the Druze, the Baha'i, and many other peoples living in the land. By 1931, there has been a natural increase
Look at
of
all those
Muslims,
Jews.
both through birth
Jews.
rate, but also through immigration. And the Jewish
looks like there's more
increase
Christians.
has also been marked. By
Yeah.
1946 is even more dramatic. And in fact, this is
Not sure why.
one of the arguments that needs to be teased out is how many
Because
of
Jesus
the
rocks.
Arabs
Ben Gavir is Albanian. Well, everyone's Albanian at heart, you know. We all started in Albania.
who moved to this region were in fact from other parts of the Arabic world and later adopted a Palestinian identity. It's something that the historical literature discusses at some length. Now, basically, what happens is the Ottoman Empire absorbs these Jewish immigrants with a certain amount of tension. They are buying the land legally from Arab notables living in the region. There's a certain amount of competition with the local Arab workforce and a certain amount of hesitancy to admit people who are definitely trying to build a new nation state in this region. There's also a Kulturkampf, a culture struggle between the highly
Hello,
conservative
Destiny Raiders. Welcome, welcome. I just saw the number. Go boop. All right, nice one.
Muslims living in the region and these European modern Jewish immigrants who are, having women dressed differently, educated very differently, engage in different kinds of cultural activities, which many of the Muslims find shocking and different and so on. Is in the context of World War I, the Ottoman Empire disappears, and the British and the French engage
That's
in
you!
very large
That's you!
geopolitical.
Balfour was also a Scot. Balfour's a Scottish name.
And that's W.
I mean, he's not really a real Scot because I think he's one of those Scots who went down to fucking England like for like either for secondary school or for uni like right away. So I don't really claim like J.K. Rowling. He's like a fake Scot.
It's really strange how much of early British advocacy for Zionism is extremely anti-Semitic. Maybe we give them this land. The Jews will use their Jew magic to help us win the war.
Yeah. How fucking annoying must it be to be like you fight the Ottomans like an army and you fuck them up so that Britain can win the war, but the Jews are just like, I don't know. They just thought we were more powerful than we were. Yeah, God.
I wonder if early Zionists played tricks on the on British officials. They went in there as pick a card, any card.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. Do you think they just see it as work smart, not hard? I don't know.
Hell yeah.
God.
I respect that. I respect the hustle.
Discussions to essentially divide up the region between them. The way this plays out specifically for the region we're talking about is especially represented in this document here, written by the Foreign Secretary Lord Balfour. This is the so-called Balfour Declaration, in which he writes this message to Lord Rothschild and asks him to send it to the Zionist Federation. And look at the inside paragraph there, which really encapsulates the problem that the British would have for the next 50-odd years. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. That's at the point where most Jews just stopped reading, and it was a big party for them because it looked like England, which was in fact, very soon going to take over this region with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. England was going to give Palestine to the Jews. But the second part of the paragraph reads, "It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country." Meaning the British were saying essentially two things at the same time. On the one hand, they're going to give some of this land to the Jews for their Jewish homeland, but at the same time they're saying as long as the Arab peoples living there do not object. And that's basically going to be impossible. It's also going to be something which will definitely affect the Jews living in any other country as well, as we shall see. Jews celebrate this with great excitement, and Arabs are concerned. They're not using the term Palestinians for themselves, but as I mentioned in the prelude, let's just refer to them as Palestinians. That term will become much more popular when we get to the second half of the 20th century. The first series of disturbances were...
Yeah, that Balfour was a huge anti-Semite. Really? Yeah, I did know that. Yeah. Him and Lloyd George as well, no? Because Lloyd George was also one of the big proponents of the Zionist project from British politics. Yeah.
Associated with the Nabi Musa festival, which ironically commemorates the life of Moses, held sacred by both Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And in the context of this initial riot, 5 Jews and 4 Arabs were killed, and 230 people, primarily Jews in this case, were injured. And this kicks off a series of riots and retaliations. Arab riots against Jews and occasionally Jewish riots against Arabs as well, that go throughout the 1930s, culminating in a major period between 1936 and 1939 of very, very heavy violence. I will allow other historians to work out, which acts of violence were more significant, but there's no question that what people refer to as the cycle of violence really begins in 1920, right after the Balfour Declaration. So the British right away, they're very good at establishing commissions, and they establish a new commission under Earl Peel, and he issues a massive document called the Peel Report. And very rarely has anyone said it as well as this particular report does. I'll just read to you one section. This is from chapter 20, which could basically say the same thing about much of the later part of the century.
How long is the Peel Report? I always wonder if I should actually just read these things. Let me see.
Reading's for nerds, am I right, chat?
Hey.
Just ask your streamer what they think of the thing they didn't read.
Text of the Peel Commission of 20 chapters, bro. Unless those chapters are like, those chapters. Hey, that's chapter 1. A brief account of ancient Jewish times in Palestine, of the Arab conquest and occupation, of the dispersion of Jews and the development of the Jewish problem, and the growth of the meaning of Zionism. Chapter 2. Hey, that's quick. That's pretty nice and quick. Nice and brief. I should really read this because it's not even that long. Every time I hear
like a twit longer.
the Johnny Commission or the Dixie fucking cunter
Dixie
report,
cunter.
I'm just like, I don't care. All right.
Well,
this sounds so boring, but let's see. Let's go.
The problem of Palestine is briefly restated. Under the stress of the World War, this is of course World War I, the British government made promises to Arabs and Jews in order to obtain their support. On the strength of those promises, both parties formed certain expectations. The application to Palestine of the mandate system in general, and of the specific mandate in particular, implies the belief that the obligations thus undertaken towards the Arabs and the Jews respectively would prove in course of time to be mutually compatible, owing to the conciliatory effect on the Palestinian Arabs of the material prosperity which Jewish immigration would bring in Palestine as a whole. That belief has not been justified, and there seems to be no hope of its being justified in the future. In other words, the British said that they were hoping that, by having Jews move in, and
that report sounds like a J-down, to be honest. I was just thinking that. So if 2 people say it.
improve the economy. And the Peel report actually discusses that, yeah, Jewish immigration did help the economy significantly. There was a lot more employment. There was a lot more capital flowing and a lot more foreign investment. But
when people say this, it's like, how did Jews contribute so much to this economy at that time? I feel like there's a really easy explanation for that. For the general success of the entire Zionist movement is that the Zionist movement was modern. They were founded in the late 1800s, not like by any state or anything. It was by, you know what I mean? It was by fucking like just individuals like getting together. So they were able to have a very meritocratic system. I think they started electing women into their systems like even before the British did. They had like or letting women vote. So I think, is it not just because they were more modern, whereas all these systems from the new Arab countries were just like they were leftovers from the old Ottoman system, like an old 100 years old feudal system that was very not meritocratic, like very archaic. So is that not just why?
You're saying I should start a nation through Kickstarter?
Yeah, the Zionists were like a Kickstarter, and that's kind of why they had a lot more advantages, because they were, yeah. I don't know, because I think that was one of the big problems during the mandate was that both groups, I think, were invited to start like a sort of like a prelude to a state,
bastard,
like a precursor to a state. And I think the Jewish one was it like the National Jewish fucking Administration or Agency or something like that? But they did one. They started one. The Palestinian groups the Arabs in that region didn't do that, because to them it was just like they were like a feudal kind of lord system, and they just kind of wanted to. They didn't really have as much incentive to prepare for statehood, right?
Not much national aspiration.
Just because like the way that the leaderships were appointed, they were appointed in a very like, yeah, again, not meritocratic way. It was the agency, yeah. The Arab revolt leaders were poorly organized and couldn't agree on who would be the leaders post World War I. Yeah, that too, yeah. I think that's a pretty easy explanation. I don't know.
That prosperity,
feudalism is just, it's slow, right? Yeah.
Would not help to solve the political dispute between the Arabs and the Jews in this region. Let's go back. But the British people cannot, on that account, repudiate their obligations, and apart from obligations, the existing circumstances in Palestine would still require the most strenuous efforts.
Was it the Jewish Agency for Israel? The operative branch of the World Zionist Organization? Wasn't this kind of like their precursor to the Jewish state? Working to secure a vibrant Jewish future. Yeah, I think it was this. Yeah, anyway.
On the part of the government, which is responsible for the welfare of the country. The existing circumstances are summarized as follows. An irrepressible conflict has arisen between two national communities within the narrow bounds of one small country. There is no common ground between them. Their national aspirations are incompatible. The Arabs desire to revive the traditions of the Arab Golden Age. The Jews desire to show what they can achieve when restored to the land in which the Jewish nation was born. Neither of the two national ideals permits of combination in the service of a single state. This may be the genesis of what was called the two-state solution, which was eagerly pursued by many diplomatic efforts in the second half of the 20th century. God willing, we'll get to that in another lecture. The Peel report had an appendix which laid out a map.
Aubergine. The British-controlled Aubergine from like Tel Aviv and Jaffa to Jerusalem.
A controversial map here that said we should partition this region. And the area outlined in red was to be given to the Jews as a homeland. As you can see, it's a tiny fraction of the later boundaries of the land of Israel, and not entirely conforming to the way the populations had spread out through the land. A lot of Arabs were in this region, a lot of Jews were outside this region, and Jews were incensed that this is what Peel was suggesting. And there's also that kind of like It looks like a word bubble extending from the ocean to Jerusalem. That's supposed to be like an international zone, allowing for access to the holy sites in Jerusalem for everybody. And the rest of the region outside of that red line would be an Arab country, presumably attached to what was called Transjordan. Transjordan was actually separated from the British mandate applied to Palestine earlier. So the Jews were incensed, the Arabs were not satisfied, and this came to naught. The period of...
I heard Mohammed Hijab say that this Peel Commission was accepted by the Arabs, but I have never found... I tried looking for evidence of that, but that's just not true, is it? Unless anyone has anything contrary to it, I don't think this was ever embraced by the Arabs. I know the Zionists rejected it, but... Okay.
Arabs were not satisfied, and this came to naught. The period of 1936 to 1939 saw extensive dissatisfaction with the British mandate and the mandate authorities. Arab uprisings, Jewish violence against each other and against the British were pursued throughout this period. The British attempted under Colonial Secretary Malcolm MacDonald to look at the problem again, once the British again are very good at establishing commissions.
What a job title.
And he wrote up a white paper that suggested perhaps they should limit Jewish immigration to the land to 75,000 people over 5 years, which was guaranteed to blow the lid off Jewish aspirations, because look at the time we're talking about. It's the late 1930s. Anti-Semitism is ramping up in Europe under Hitler, and of course World War II would begin in 1939, just a few months after the white paper came out, and immigration of Jews anywhere was a top concern for the entire Jewish people, because of course Hitler would take 6 million lives over the course of World War II.
Two Nakbas. Oh, is he going to talk about the Jewish exodus? Okay.
After the Holocaust, you have millions of displaced people all over Europe. Hundreds of thousands of Jews in particular are unwilling or unable to return to their homes in Poland, and they're seeking to establish themselves in the ancestral homeland of Israel.
Holodomor?
Legal migration and illegal migration.
Kate Somnia, thanks for the sub. Really appreciate that. I'm so happy we still have that wheel spinning around in there.
Migration is happening at a tremendous clip, and the British are desperate to try and hold off these thousands of Jews who are seeking to make their way to safety in the Middle East. The Arabs, of course, are very incensed with the idea that Europe's problems should be solved with migration to the Middle East, but as one Zionist from the Arab put it, the Arabs have a problem of appetite and the Jews have a problem of starvation. They needed someplace else to live, and no other place was acceptable. So basically the British gave up. Very similar to how they dealt with their departure from India. You know, the entire geopolitical world had changed. They had to retrench themselves after World War II, and they handed the problem off to the United Nations. The United Nations came up with...
ANCAP in Argentina won the elections. Wait, really?
Really? Recently I saw he was making like a lot of schizophrenic statements. Did he actually win? I'd have thought...
Shock therapy libertarian. Oh my God.
Wow. That ain't gonna go well.
Far right. Oh God. Are we going to see how ANCAP actually works in practice then?
He's his runoff advantage. This is the runoff election. This would mean he like legitimately wins.
Yeah. What the fuck? Argentina is teetering on the brink of an unpredictable new political era this weekend, with an erratic far-right populist known as El Loco, the Madman.
El Loco.
the slight favorite to become president of South America's second largest economy in Sunday's election. As polls open on Sunday morning against a backdrop of soaring inflation and widespread poverty, analysts believe Javier Milei, I don't know, fucking, a TV celebrity turned congressman, held a... Why is all these fucking TV celebrities becoming leaders of countries? Anyway,
populism's on the rise, man.
Held a slender advantage over his rival, the finance minister Sergio Massa, but said the result was too close to call. Massa, a centrist member of Alberto Fernandez's incumbent Peronist administration, unexpectedly won last month's first round with 9.8 million votes to Milei's 8 million. But since then, Milei, climate-denying provocateur, often compared to the far-right populists Trump and Bolsonaro, has been endorsed by several influential conservatives, including former President Mauricio Macri, sorry, I don't fucking, and the third-place candidate Patricia Bullrich, who had previously condemned his bad and dangerous proposals. He dialed down his inflammatory rhetoric in the weeks since October's vote, hoping to seduce voters put off by his radical ideas, which include closing more than a dozen ministries, cutting ties with Argentina's two biggest trade partners, Brazil and China, and condemning the Pope as a lefty son of a bitch.
Hey, what a fun candidate. This must be what it felt like for foreigners watching Donald Trump get elected for the first time. Like a fun show until you realize he's president of the most powerful nation on the planet.
Yep.
Thankfully, this is not the most powerful nation on the planet. It's a nation in perpetual economic catastrophe.
This is the most important election in the last 100 years. Wow. Urging voters to evict the delinquent Peronist politicians who have governed Argentina for 16 of the last 20 years and have ruined our lives. Let hope overcome fear. The hope of a better country exists. Why is he an ANCAP? Why are people saying that?
Because he wants to shut down all the government. His
All the
whole
agent- yeah, all
policy
the
is
fucking-
like, government sucks, shut down the government, government sucks, shut down the
Yeah.
government.
Holy shit.
Rand Paul got elected. I don't remember Rand Paul ever saying the Pope was a lefty son of a bitch, though.
Is
I
it
don't remember
Ron
that.
Paul or Rand Paul?
There's two different
Okay.
Pauls. There's Ron Paul and then there's Rand Paul. They're both like hardcore libertarians, though.
Hey, Ukrainian Anna's on Twitch. Hello, how's it going?
Hello, Ukrainian Anna. Hello. She made me watch Lord of the Rings. I'm gonna watch the third one with Lonerbox.
Yeah, we'll do that. All right. Experts say concerns over Milei's mindset may be insufficient to save Massa's campaign, given Argentina's economic woes. This is a failed government with a record level of inflation, and he's minister for the economy. Okay. Rise of populism between a terrible thing and a crazy guy. Let's go for crazy because perhaps it's better than a terrible thing. Damn. That's from a historian who studies the wave. It's really that simple.
So this
answer
is
the
like
best answer.
this is just like Trump. Then it's like quite literally just we need a Molotov cocktail into the establishment. We know that what we currently have sucks, so let's get something different.
Holy shit. Observers are divided on what his presidency might look like. The wild-haired celebrity economist
I really love
who
this
only
article
entered
describes him. It's
politics
great.
after being elected to Congress. I'm trying to imagine what he looks like now. But between Dracula and Frankenstein. Okay.
He had a recent interview on TV where it looks like he was developing like psychosis in real time, where he was like, "Did you hear that?"
Oh,
What?
this is the policies. Wait. He vowed to abolish the central bank, replace its currency with the dollar. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm an American. I like that.
And slashed government expenditure by 14%. On the campaign trail, he has brandished a chainsaw to symbolize his desire to eliminate spending and corruption. His vice presidential running mate, Victoria Villarreal, has ties to members of Argentina's murderous 76 to 83 dictatorship and has controversially questioned the consensus over the number of people killed by that regime. You know what? You know what's happening. Okay, prediction. This guy is going to fail, and he's going to try to drum up nationalism by invading the Falklands. Guys, I'm ready for it. Okay, Britain is we're not the power that we used to be. Okay, and those Falkland Islands are pretty far away, and probably now because of all the lefty Twitch politics shit, maybe a sizable portion of the nation is actually convinced that the Falklands is like British settler colonialism, and we need to give
That's
it back
true.
to the
Hassan will
Argentinians.
stop the war, and he'll give it to Argentina.
Holy shit. If they invade the Falklands before the next election, and that's what keeps the Tories in power.
Could you imagine Rishi Sunak on national TV? We must defend the Falklands. Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. Holy shit.
So now I guess we're finally going to see Ancapistan in practice, huh?
Yeah. Ancapistan, the Second Falklands War. Oh, God. Hard right libertarian. Political firepower to push through his most radical plans if elected. Doesn't have a single governor, doesn't have a single mayor, not sure major reforms in 2 years. Okay, so might not have the legislative power to do it. Okay. He's way more excessive than Bolsonaro and Trump. It's highly unpredictable what this person could do in power. Bro, I fear for the Falklands. I fear.
Ah, come on. He's not. Argentina's in crisis. The idea that The
I fear for
libertarian
the-
candidate is going to start a war. I don't know.
I fear for the front lines of British colonialism. I fear for the Iron Front of the British Empire.
You know, if
The last wall.
the sun might finally set on the British Empire.
Yeah. I don't think the fucking junta was presiding over a great economy. Isn't that why they invaded the Falklands?
Yeah, that's
To
a
drum
part
up
of
national
it.
sentiment?
That is part of it, yeah.
Bro.
It'd be really funny if the first, like, ANCAP president started a war of national reconquest.
The question is, though, will I put my money where my mouth is and actually sign up to defend the Falklands? Because I talk the talk when it comes to the Falklands, you know?
Are you a big supporter of the British Falklands people?
Yeah, because you know why? Because the Falklands War was a land back war. And we won. We won the land back war. We took it back from those goddamn fascist junta fucking leaders.
Lonerbox. You
Smarmy
smarmy
cuck
bastard.
bastard.
Bro. Oh, shit. Okay. It's also the funniest one to debate because, like, with with like decolonization leftists, because they think like the Falklands counts as like a settler colony in the same way as like, I don't know, fucking South Africa or something, you know?
I mean, but he's not actually going to get Falklands. And when this fails, though, it is going to be interesting to watch how the ANCAPs and libertarians explain how it wasn't true libertarianism and actually next time would work.
Yeah, well, what's this? They will say anything about us. They say we are Nazis. We laugh at it. Think whatever you want. Damn, that's one way to handle Nazi allegations. Wow. Okay. What does he look like?
It's a little crazy.
Why does he look like Fabian Liberty?
Nah, maybe a little bit.
Okay. All right. I don't even remember what Fabian looks like. I just made that. I was just thinking ANCAP. Anyway. Oh, God. All right. Let's go back to Jewish history.
With this resolution, number 181, which essentially said the land should be partitioned into 7 sections. And here's a map which was attached to the bottom of resolution 181 that divides the land of Israel quite differently from the Peel report. The green areas were to be Jewish. There are 3 of them connected by tiny little wastes. And the goldenrod areas are to be Arab, also connected by these little wastes. And a 7th section was to be around the area of Jerusalem, and that was supposed to be, like the Peel report, some kind of international zone. The history after this point is well known. The Jews, now Israelis, accepted the plan, and in 1948 they proclaimed statehood, and they were immediately attacked by Arab armies surrounding them. They fought a very, very difficult war, but ended up managing to not only keep this territory, but in fact expand it somewhat.
I don't know if he's just doing it for brevity, but it's like you could probably elaborate a bit more on the history. So yeah, they accept it, the Arabs reject it. There's like civil conflict with irregulars in here, and Israel's on the defensive for a couple of months. And then after they kind of group themselves up with the Haganah and the Irgun and Lehi, is they push back. And in their pushing back, they devise a plan that involves giving people basically carte blanche, because that's what it effectively became, to throw people out of their villages and to burn down or blow up the houses.
I mean, even
you know, it's like before the war started, before the Arabs invaded, yeah. Like with the, and yeah, like all the massacres and the war crimes that were committed in order to do that. I don't know why they skip over that part. Yeah.
I'm sure he has to cover the Nakba. It's impossible to not cover the Nakba.
But it's the way that they say, like they declare it, and then the Arabs say no, and then the war, they declare independence, then the war starts and the Arabs invade. Because I think if you're like the pro-Zionist person, it's like it sells a lot better to say that the expulsions happened all during the war, right? Not that 200, 300,000 people had already fled before the Arab nations set foot in this territory.
Because then Israelis can just point to what happened to the Jews in Jerusalem.
Yeah, well, all right.
That's a very important part of this whole history, but we should understand that the conflict with the Palestinians really began even before that war happened. As soon as Resolution 181 was passed and before the British could leave, there was already...
You kind of sound like the comments in your Gaza video, but in my Gaza video, I said the reason that they fled was because of the massacres and because of war crimes, right? Like, or because they were directly forced out. So I don't know. That was just because the fucking soy leftists were upset they didn't call it the Nakba, right? Like, okay.
Violence erupting between Jews and Arabs. And a large number of Arabs living in Palestine chose to flee. Somewhere in the range of 700,000 Arabs left their homes seeking safety. Now, one of the larger debates, like we mentioned earlier, with the cycle of violence,
is
one of the larger debates focuses on the question of why exactly did they leave. It does not take a tremendous amount of imagination to realize that, you know, families flee theaters of war. There were examples of atrocities, and even an atrocity that is exaggerated and spread through the rumor mill is something that will strike fear in the heart of a family and would cause them to flee. Once again,
did you know that Ben Gurion's government tried to poison Palestinian wells unsuccessfully, but they did that specifically because they wanted to expel the Palestinians? The idea that they just chose. Well, why do you think they tried to do that?
No, I don't think was it the government that tried to do it, or was some people did it, but then they.
Government. It was Ben Gurion's writing for. You can Google this right now if you want.
Wait, let me find the book. I remember reading about this just last night, but I'm too fucking stupid.
There's recent government documents. It was released in 2021 about it. Hello, chat. I've taken over the stream. How you doing, chat? Dylan Burns Show, Dylan Burns TV. Subscribe to Dylan Burns TV. I'm gonna release an article tomorrow on the artillery war. Releasing it with UPI. It's extensive. I hope you check it out. We embedded with artillery crews in Zaporozhye and Donetsk, supporting the counteroffensive of Zaporozhye. Hope you check it out. Yeah, it was defensive well poison, of course.
I just want to get the exact details of this because I remember there's one story. Published? 2006.
The thing I'm talking about was government documents released in 2021.
Okay. No, I'm not denying what you're saying. I just wanted to see like because I think this was gathered from Red Cross reports. So yeah, this is in Accra. It happened in Gaza as well. They tried to do it in Gaza. So the story is here: the herbicide continued into May with the occupation of Accra on the coast and Beisan in the east on 6th of May 1948. So 6th of May is before the Declaration of Independence. 10 days before, 9 days before. In the beginning of May, Accra proved once again that it was not only Napoleon who found it hard to defeat it. Despite severe overcrowding due to the huge influx of refugees from the neighboring city of Haifa, heavy daily shelling by the Jewish forces failed to subdue the Crusader city. However, its exposed water supplies 10 kilometers to the north from the Cadbury Springs via an almost 200-year-old aqueduct provided its Achilles heel. During the siege, typhoid germs were apparently injected into the water. Local emissaries of the International Red Cross reported this to their headquarters and left very little room for guessing whom they suspected, the Haganah. The Red Cross reports describe a sudden typhoid epidemic, and even with their guarded language, point to outside poisoning for the sole explanation for this outbreak. And I think it's that they tell Ben Gurion that they're doing this, and he just writes it in his diary. No, this is a separate one. That's the one in Accra, which I think is what you're referring to. Because that looks like they were actually...
Well, the thing I'm talking about is failed. Right? They failed to poison in the instances I'm talking about.
No, the failed incident is in Gaza, I think, isn't it? A similar attempt to poison the water supply in Gaza on the 27th of May was foiled. The Egyptians caught two Jews, David Horan and David Mizrahi, trying to inject typhoid and dysentery viruses into Gaza's wells. General Yadin reported the incident to Ben Gurion, then the Israel Prime Minister, who duly entered it in his diary without comment. The two were later executed by the Egyptians without any official Israeli protestations. So
pretty bad. And the thing is, the well poisoning isn't what expelled most of the Palestinians, but I think it shows clear intent.
Yeah, of course there was intent to expel. Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's not even the debate. The debate is just whether or not it was like part of a policy of war, as in like if they're aggressive to us and if we have to fight for this village, then we kick them out because we don't want the village. Because I think the military justification that they'll use is they'll say that if the only way they could win this war was to clear out the villages so that they didn't have to be on the front lines worrying about Arab aggression from the villagers and from militant groups within their borders, right? That's the military justification. The problem was that we know quite a lot of villages that did not resist people got kicked out anyway. because the kind of implicit message from the leadership was that no one was really exposed to expulsion, which is why no one was reprimanded for expulsion, even if they didn't need to do it. Like, yeah, so that's kind of like the way that goes. But yeah,
I would advise people in chat not to poison wells.
It's fucking crazy. That's from Pape, by the way. Anyone was asking. Ethnic cleansing of Palestine.
What do you think of Pape?
I think he's a bit clumsy at times, but I don't write him off completely. Like, he was one of the new historians, like, for a reason, you know? Yeah. Yeah. You can get that book online. You can get a PDF of it online. All right.
Pirate thing. Stealing is cool.
To other historians to go through the details. I'm sure you will find it useful to look at Professor Kramer's work to go into more details as to what specific events, Deir Yassin and others, that prompted many of these people to flee. But this was called the Nakba, the catastrophe, which essentially displaced something like 750,000 people from what would become the state of Israel in the armistice of
I really don't. I can't get over the fact he said chose to flee. I really don't. I was trying to like parse if this guy is really trying to be unbiased. I was really trying to parse it. I'm trying to be fair. But using those words, chose to flee, when we know many of them forcibly expelled, it feels dishonest.
It's like the language. Like, I think it was 15% at most of the villages were directly expelled. Like, as in the Haganah or the militant groups just went there and they were like, fuck off.
But that's not.
But then I'm saying, like, I'm gonna finish the second point. Like, the other people who fled, like the large numbers, fled because they heard about massacres in the other villages, and it's like, I count that as being expelled. I don't really count that as like a choice, you know? Not really. It's like a choice if someone's holding a gun to your head, right? Telling you, yeah.
I mean, of course, the rumor mill spills, and whatever makes your enemy look worse is what's probably going to spread amongst the community, right? Torture methods, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, some communities were forcibly expelled, wells were poisoned, and if this is the type of behavior that's going on, if you're a Palestinian living in what is today modern day Israel, at the time was like mandated Israel by the UN, you're going to get scared, you're going to worry for your family safety, and you're going to flee. And if we're saying that that's not expulsion, then we're saying that in order for it to count as expulsion, every single Palestinian had to personally have a Haganah soldier with a gun to his head for it to count as expulsion or ethnic cleansing, which I think is an unbelievably high standard, which I mean, we wouldn't be able to say ethnic cleansing to a lot of different instances that is universally recognized as ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even, again, because even when I read people like Morris, who deny that it was like, he doesn't really use the words ethnic cleansing, but even when I read what he says, as the contention that I get from people like him, who are more on the pro-Israel side of that argument, they'll just say that it wasn't like a premeditated, like pre-calculated policy of expulsion. Like, the expulsions were very conditional, at least on paper, but people took liberties and did it anyway, even when they didn't have to.
Ukrainians chose to flee the Donbass. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Ukrainians chose to flee Mariupol. Like, okay, that's not fair. The circumstance that caused them to flee. I wonder what it was.
If you look at this map here, you can see the green areas were assigned to the State of Israel in the 1947 partition plan. But after successfully defending the territory...
Also, if even people are saying they fled the war, right? Like, instead of just like rumors about massacres. But even then, like, Haifa was a good example of that, because I know that the story that traveling Israel guy said was like the model example was Haifa, because after the Israelis won the battle, they asked the Arabs to stay, but the Arabs left anyway. But the problem is they don't really tell you how the Battle of Haifa was won. It was won with indiscriminate bombings of very fucking inflammatory, like, bloody rhetoric from these loudspeakers that were driven through the town. And also, again, like, soldiers taking liberties with fucking women and shit like that in the town. And also, like, one of their tactics was to drive vehicles with loudspeakers on them through the town and to play shrieking sounds to terrorize the population. It's like, I feel like the people living there, even if you're telling them to stay, are kind of getting kind of mixed signals from you, you know?
He doesn't understand Israeli folk music.
Jesus. Okay.
the Israelis were able to actually add those pink areas to make the boundaries somewhat more defensible than they were before. That's essentially the origins of the Palestinian Nakba.
Sorry, if someone's saying they're anti-Semites in the chat, can you point them out? Because I can't see. Have I not been paying much attention because Dylan's here or what?
Hey, chat, if you don't think Jews are cool, you should leave. Official condemnation of anti-Semitism.
Gaia is the anti-Semite. Where are they? I can't see chat history. The eternal Oh, right. Okay. That's a big red flag. The eternal
that's not
victims.
good.
Where are we? Let's go up. This is how I have to do chat history here. Everything was wrong with being a Zionist. You're currently doing a genocide. That's not quite what Zionist. Why not ban Zionists? Okay. Why did you even create people with different skin colors? Didn't you know it would lead to race? What? Okay, that's probably not the most convincing chat history. Where are we? Bye.
Damn.
It's also important to note that there is a Jewish version of this Nakba at the same time. Shortly after this war,
Forcibly
there was a wave
expel the
of anti-Jewish persecution throughout the Islamic
He told you to go back to Poland a few times.
world, particularly in Arab lands, and Jews were forced to flee from
I don't understand how like the European settler colonialism narrative about Israel, when you consider like why those Europeans, a lot of them went down to Israel, it's fucking a bit weird.
Many of these countries, perhaps 800,000 Jews were required to flee. Many of them
I love this map. Just because some of the numbers are so insane. Lebanon, it's down to 20 now. It's actually lower than 100.
Right, look at Iran.
My favorite one is Afghanistan. Where is it? One known Jew in 2019.
I like the fun, funky spelling of Iraq there.
Oh, yeah. But now it's not chose to leave, it was forced to flee. But again, someone like there was, I think the policy of expulsion that I could find from these countries was Egypt, where they actually just gave Jews 24 hours and told them to leave. But with the other ones, like I think this one, there is also, again, there's some debate about push and pull factors, because there's the part where people in all these countries were massively persecuted. There were like pogroms and riots happening throughout the 40s, and especially a lot of violence as a result of Israel being formed. And then, but there's also the part with the other half of that story, I guess, is people from Israel coming over and being like, "Hey, you want to come to a nice old Jewish state where there's only Jew?" Yeah. So
this is a question you need to ask people who want to completely destroy Israel. Is number one, not only where did the Jews go? Because then a lot of times you'll get a response of like, I don't know, go back to New Jersey. But when you talk about Jews from Libya, when you talk about Jews from Yemen, what are they going to go back to Houthi-controlled territory? Where are they going to go?
Because really, by a lot of that logic, is they have the right to reclaim all the land and property that they lost, right? They can just go and kick out any random Iraqi who lives in what used to be a Jewish home, right?
Yeah, that would be the standard.
Which I'd love to see who actions that policy of land back.
They'd all get killed by
Get the 5,000 Afghan Jews back. And again, these are all like populations that will have multiplied, you know? Like
making their way to Israel, which ironically achieved the opposite purpose of what many of these states might have had.
Was Doncaster a false flag? I really want to know where that guy was during the Jewish exodus of Doncaster.
Mind, because it made Israel much.
You know about Doncaster?
No, I do not.
Oh, shithole in England. I don't know, but some women got really mad because some guys were paragliding in Doncaster in like mid-October, and she complained to the council because she said that she thought Hamas were attacking. So I looked up how many Jews live in Doncaster, and there's like none.
That's weird.
So like,
why would Hamas
what happened to the Jews of Doncaster?
Why would Hamas's two main targets, Tel Aviv and Doncaster.
Maybe they just wanted to check in case any had survived the first Hamas attack of Doncaster.
Everybody's
The
the
first
noise has
purge
made
of
everyone. The
Doncaster.
news has made everyone paranoid. It was like after 9/11.
Yeah.
More stable and stronger demographically and further cemented its presence in the Middle East. So that's a very quick overview of the major events that contribute to the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. I'm sure that many of you will comment that I forgot to mention this or forgot to mention that. And it's true. It's inevitable that as I attempt to compress this massive history into a very, very short presentation, it's inevitable to omit certain things. But I hope that this overview...
Ed Miliband is Doncaster MP, but isn't Ed Miliband a Jew?
Wasn't Ed Miliband the labor leader that really sucked any or didn't get anybody to vote for him?
Ed Miliband ran in 2015, and yeah, there was a Tory majority.
I'm only familiar with Ed Miliband through that puppet show, and he looking goofy on it.
Yeah. What, Wallace and Gromit?
Not Wallace and Gromit. What was that? There's one
Because he looks like
political
Wallace.
puppet show that the British. Yeah, I know Wallace and Gromit. Apparently, they're trying to remake another one, and they ran out of clay. It's really weird. But no,
this
there was
is
a different
Wallace.
one. I forget
This
what
is
it's
Ed
called.
Miliband.
There was a British like political show with all puppets. I forget what it's called. Somebody in chat will remind me. I love Wallace and Gromit. Wait, this is some weird.
He is pretty close, isn't he?
This is like a little bit like him. Spitting Image. Yeah, that was it. Spitting Image. Thank you, chat.
Spitting Image, yeah.
That's all I'm familiar with Ed Miliband from.
does something to break down the tunnel vision that's so prevalent on social media today, and people can have hopefully productive discussions about how this conflict may be resolved peaceably and that all the peoples in the land should enjoy health and prosperity. Thank you very much for watching.
What do you think of that summary?
I think there's a bit of a bias, but I don't know. I watch stuff like that because I learned like a couple of new things. Like I didn't know that Jerusalem Post used to be called the Palestine Post.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
I never saw all the expulsions mapped out like that either. That is pretty.
The Jewish expulsions.
Yeah, the Jewish expulsions.
Yeah. And also the fucking typhoid thing. We got to do the details of that as well.
Bro, the poisonings.
With Gaza. I did, because I didn't know that until last night. I didn't know that in Gaza, 2 Jewish guys just tried to poison the well, got caught by Egyptians and executed. And David Ben-Gurion just wrote it in his diary and didn't comment on it. Like, 2 Jews got caught trying to poison the wells today. Oh well. Won't be hearing from them again.